Hi, my name is Quinlan and you are watching my talking face on YouTube. It's easy to consider it normal that you're watching me talking to you through a video on the internet, but there's actually a lot of background architecture that goes into a platform and a website like YouTube. And in a way, it's a really good example of how my internship this semester works. This semester, I've been working at the Lab Miami. Lab is a startup co-working space in Wynwood, the creative and arts district in Miami. It's a shared work environment for several startups and creatively minded entrepreneurs. Co-working spaces like Lab have a very simple premise. They think that in a startup economy, individuals and small companies need the right environment and culture to generate and refine their ideas, as well as basic access to physical business amenities like an address or desk space or Wi-Fi. In this sense, it's a bit like a gym, where the membership revenue underpins the business model, and the members of the space benefit from access to not only the people there, but also the resources available. Consider the metaphor of YouTube, which is a platform for its own network of filmers and video makers and bloggers and everyone else, who each in turn contribute to the YouTube community through the ad revenue generated on their own videos. Beyond just being a video website, YouTube has a lot of interactive features which makes it into a network. So if you don't like what I'm saying, or you don't like how this video is presented, you can leave a comment, or you can dislike the video. But if you do like what I'm saying, and you do like how this looks, then you can subscribe or like or leave a comment. So in the same sense, Lab, as does any good co-working space, recognizes the group and individual benefits of a strong ecosystem. Lab is special because they don't just look at this in their own building, but they also look at trying to promote the startup economy of the entire South Florida metropolitan region. Lab supports this ecosystem by being the critically important actual space where things happen. So, for example, they host regular events like hackathons, and they also have special features like conferences featuring the likes of Richard Florida, the famous urban innovation theorist. Because Lab is such an open-minded company, the members of Lab can themselves use the space as they want to. Well, I'm filming this video right now in a small conference room within Lab, but right outside in the main room, Urban.us, a Lab member company, is actually hosting Smart City Startups. It's a conference and pitch session over a couple of days, and it fits into Urban.us's larger goals because the company works by funding and supporting companies themselves that bring tech solutions to civic problems. So Lab is a company that supports a company that's in turn supporting companies. Now indeed, because of the Lab's platform focus on social issues, many of the companies themselves are as well. So not beyond Urban.us, there's also groups like Learner Nation. Learner Nation is a company that provides tech education combined with hiring practices of dynamic companies through massive open online courses, or MOOCs. This helps the training and recruitment process of really big and really fast-growing companies. Or take, for example, UDoodle, a nonprofit group that's founded by current students that's aimed at increasing social creativity and fun through group doodling. The stuff Lab companies do isn't necessarily going to be the next Flappy Bird or Candy Crush, but Lab stands for Learn, Act, and Build, and its members are really committed to building. At Lab, my project focuses on growing the entrepreneurial mindsets at the campuses of local universities, including the University of Miami. So at one of the things that I've done is I've worked with the Entrepreneurship Association to coordinate a startup showcase of Lab companies and alumni at Topple Career Center. So if the big question that I'm looking at is how to use platforms to grow innovation in cities, I'm thinking that one of the key parts of the answer is going to come from existing institutions, specifically universities. The problem is that besides few exceptions like MIT and Stanford, universities aren't broadly doing the job of preparing students to make new solutions or work in dynamic companies or, broadly speaking, think like an entrepreneur. To continue the metaphor, if this were YouTube, what I would be doing is researching how to get more potential filmmakers making videos on the website. Or I would be connecting the YouTube community with film and creative schools that they can know where they can go to get their ideas off the ground. I've learned a lot specifically about how the startup and innovation ecosystem functions, with intersections between organizations, like colleges and governments, and entrepreneurs and financiers and co-working spaces and other stakeholders. So interning at Lab didn't actually require any major technical skills, although for future interns, for example, potential skills like programming or graphic design or other specific things that companies within the lab really could use could be used for future interns. Entrepreneurs are increasingly the face of global capitalism, and the networks where they thrive are emblematic of the changing types of organizations and solutions of large, daunting public challenges, like urban management, job creation, and economic growth, and more. So increasingly, the biggest changes in public policy or theory, or even international diplomacy, involve these decentralized horizontal networks, as opposed to traditionally vertical hierarchies. For example, in the 21st century, one could argue that YouTube and the spread of videos cataloging social change and protests is much more important for diplomacy than the Foreign Service and the diplomatic corps. I'm interning at a small-scale example in what is a really big trend. Now, the main questions that Lab is seeking to find answers to is how communities can grow and create quality jobs with support of existing institutions. It's not necessarily a question of high liberal versus realist or constructivist or other theoretical politics, but how those vertical hierarchies support horizontal networks is hugely important. So the research that I'm doing this semester is focusing specifically on how colleges promote entrepreneurship and what the best practices are, with implications for the project that I'm working on within the lab. It's really important to remember that with these theoretical questions in mind, lots of the issues are really, really new, so the types of solutions don't fall into simple theoretical classifications. The academic study of entrepreneurship, for example, dates back to Joseph Schumpeter's work in the mid-century, and on the ideas of innovation came with Peter Drucker's research at Columbia Business School in the 1970s and 80s. The theory of creativeness and networks developed in the 80s and 90s, and it was Richard Florida who connected these ideas to the stakeholders and urban management in his work on creative classes. Co-working spaces, for example, largely date from the recession onward, when freelance work exploded during a slacking economy. The Lab Miami, for example, only dates to 2012, and it's definitely already the most established community in Miami startups. So I'm looking at that as one option, but there are other models of how existing institutions can promote innovation. Entrepreneurship as an academic study gained large acceptance in business schools in the 1980s and 90s. And apart from the fabled dorm rooms that gave birth to Facebook and Yahoo and others, colleges have provided business incubators and seed accelerators for a few years back now. I want to try and see what are the best practices and how did those places work, to maybe see how we can get things like that going at the University of Miami and around South Florida. In my practical work, I've set up networking and interest sessions between university students and local startups as a demonstration of the ideas that get generated when people come together, as well as the interest among the student body of just hearing about these kinds of things. When I brought together a startup showcase at Topple for my civic engagement, there were conversations between the students and the company owners about how to improve, say, for example, unreleased websites, or the product launches for better marketing. And lots of good questions about the bigger pictures about the social and financial impacts that companies can make. So these types of discussions, they're really common and really productive at co-working spaces, which is why I'm so interested in seeing what universities are doing to bring them together. At the lab, you have a lot of freedom to work on whatever projects suit your interests. Because of the tremendous array of human capital present in places like that, there are lots of ways to get involved, with lots of different skill sets demanded. The thing is that you need to figure out what skill sets you have and then decide from there what projects you want to make up and what you want to work on, and figure out whom in the lab you can help and whom in the lab you can look to for advice. Because it's so independent, it's not a traditional internship, and defining the work that you do is really, really confusing at first. It took me a few weeks of conversation after the semester had already started with the companies at Lab. And my boss, who was then the director of development, Brett Hudson, he took the idea for a project in place. We're revamping the South Florida Talent Development Network, an initiative to support Miami companies through the Beacon Council. It wasn't really that established when we found it, and we wanted to try and run it through co-working spaces and other third space models. I wanted to see if we can connect the project to colleges and their career centers, which supported Lab's bigger goal of reaching out and growing the Miami ecosystem. And this in turn also gave the project a new avenue forward. So that just about does everything that I'm doing at Lab and some of the bigger picture questions that I'm working on. If you have any questions or if you're really interested in finding out more, please leave a comment. Please give me some feedback as to what I'm doing. Until then, it's been a really great semester and I really enjoyed my time there. Thank you.